Hey guys and wayward gals, welcome back to the Ramble. I am your humble host, my Reologier, and this is The Traveller. The Traveller came, at long last and after many adventures, upon a village seemingly bathed in sunlight. As he came closer to the village, he saw men toiling in the fields as men are known to do, shirtless, red and scorched from working in the sun. The men there appeared to be digging holes and moving dirt. Travelling for weeks on end, as is the traveller's toil, he was thirsty, hungry, and soaked in sweat. It had been a warm couple of days, and the lack of rain and wind had not done wonders for his constitution. His mood, however, was as excellent as it always had been, and seeing the village made it better yet, as this gave alluring promises of much needed rest and relaxation, until his travels would continue. He still had some food left in his backpack. His supply of water, however, had run out. No rivers or streams had the journeyman encountered since the last village upon which he had stumbled, wherein he had been able to stock up on food and water, wherein he had slept in a bed for a few days before carrying on upon the road. His was a journey with no end in sight, a journey driven by nothing but wanderlust and the pure, unbridled joy of curiosity. Halting for a moment to survey the land, to take in the sights, he saw the buildings erected in the village, all of solid stone. He spied a giant tower in the town square, upon whose elaborately designed and curiously intricately carved arabesque pedestal a giant clock rested, ticking, tocking, gazing down upon all those who toiled in the fields. To his surprise, he saw no children playing, nor any people resting, neither in the fields or in the streets below the curious clock tower. No susurration or strange hum of life came from the village. And this came as a surprise to the traveller, though he had encountered stranger things and weirder sights upon the road, and so resolved to not think over much on it, reasoning that he had merely stumbled upon the village at the busiest time of day or of season, or of both, that all and sundry would be engaged in their tasks at the moment, yet would retire in the evening for rest and merriment and such. The traveller tried his best to gain the attention of the men he saw there in the fields, and this had no effect, as they all seemed to ignore him, engaged in their toil as they were, paying little heed to anything else. No wonder, thought the traveller. They are far away and their task must be important. Walking further down, into the shadows cast from the tall buildings like stone and marble monuments, his feet hit the pebbled road, moving by pure chance and coincidence along with the beat, the rhythmic ticking of the clock. How strange, thought the traveller as he walked gaily down the street, searching for water and a bed in which to spend the night. He then came upon a group of men tearing down a stone wall, removing it stone by stone, bit by bit. Thought the traveller, it should be possible to here inquire as to water and to bed, those two things that seemed to be of the most importance at the moment. The sun was rising in the sky, the temperature increased, the still air offered little in way of consolation, being hot and humid and giving the traveller the sensation that it was hard to breathe. Looked he then with sympathy upon the men in their work dismantling the stone wall, and inquired whether they would take a rest soon, as it must be time to eat and drink. The men there, never pausing in their task, looked at him as though he was crazy, as if the words he spoke were madness or heresy or both. They carried on with neither a word nor a gesture in reply or response, once again leaving the traveller to his own devices. And so he moved along the immaculately paved road, spotless buildings rising higher and higher around him as he came closer to the centrepiece of the village, the giant clock with its tick and with its tock, noticing not only the absence of children, but also the absence of women and of the elderly. Very curious, the traveller thought, as he moved through spiralling pathways and buildings that seemed to get taller with every step. The village, it appeared, was bigger than the traveller had at first assumed, more like a city or a town than a village, and yet it was so quiet as to be wholly deserted. Not a sound could he hear but the sound of work and the eternal ticking of the clock, ticking with nuclear precision and, seemingly, forcing his feet to move with its beat, the steady, thundering, omnipresent tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Here and there he saw men engaged in work, all middle-aged or thereabout. Now and then he attempted to engage them in conversation, or at the least get direction towards an inn. None replied, that seemed to be their custom. And so he carried on, towards the centre and the clock and the tick and the tock. Usually given to a light mood and being something of an easy-going character, the traveller could not help but feel an increasing sense of unease. A certain sensation of dread crept along his spine, something he was not accustomed to. Still, his resolve was iron and his will untouchable, and so he moved onwards through the now labyrinthine pathways, seemingly moving through spiralling circles, hearing only the ticking of the clock and getting closer, ever closer to the source. There was a strange feeling of moving downwards, as if in a vortex of sorts. The sun seemed to have disappeared, hidden somewhere far beyond the towering buildings, and he and the streets and all there was and ever should be was bathed in shadow and in darkness, as though night had come upon him without warning. All of a sudden, giving him as little warning as what he thought of as a sudden nightfall, he found himself standing at the base of the clock tower, which he had spied from afar in what seemed like a dream a lifetime ago. Gazing from its base to its pinnacle was dizzying, maddening, a horrifying task that gave the traveller such a sensation as he had never felt before. A terrible sensation of both falling and flying towards the peak of the tower. He steadied himself as best he could, then sat down in confusion and was surprised to see, far above him, that on either side of the clock there stood two men, pulling a lever for every tick and for every tock. Tick went the lever and the clock and the men that by it stood. Tock went the lever and the clock and the men that by it stood. Tick. Tick, tock. How long had they been standing there, toiling and toiling? The traveller wondered out loud to himself. The sudden words spoken, whispered, seemed to make the silence surrounding him even more profound, even more enveloping, seemed to make the ticking of the clock more intense, somewhat angry, somehow enraged, he thought. He sat at the base of the clock tower for what seemed like hours, and quite possibly was, entranced and ensnared by the ticking of the clock that seemed to drink and eat all other sounds and all his resolve and all his spirit and his soul. No longer could he hear the sounds of work, nor his own heartbeat or his own breathing. He could only hear the ticking of the infernal clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Finally, summoning what little strength and resolve remained, he arose and moved back the way he had come, noticing that there were no paths or roads to take to move him beyond the clock tower. There was nothing there but a gigantic wall of buildings, all in grey stone, windows looking down at him with no light from the inside, like soulless eyes staring, glaring, hypnotized, dead and decayed and dreary. Moving back through the spiralling road, rejecting the strange pull of the clock, the odd sensation of being dragged towards it with every tick and every tock, the traveller came once again upon those who had been dismantling the stone wall, being surprised to see that they were now putting it back together again. Stone by stone and bit by bit they put it back together again, strange pieces like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. The men there, still toiling, still sweating, still saying nothing or doing nothing, but the task that was put there in front of them seemed oblivious to all but the task. They worked and they toiled as though in a trance, caught, perhaps, in some strange web from which they could not escape, whose cobwebbed pattern they could not feel or sense or notice. Moving ever onwards and outwards, feeling as though he was climbing upwards even when the ground beneath him was as level as could be, the ticking of the clock becoming less intrusive with every step, the sun beating down on his face again, the air feeling free and fresh, at least in comparison to the air beneath the clock tower. Again he came upon the men in the field and saw that they were now filling the holes that they previously had dug with the same dirt and the same mud. The men merely stared at him, all the while moving the dirt mechanically, not looking at the task, barely noticing what they were doing. Their gaze at him and their movement felt as unnerving as the tick and the tock. He looked away and walked away. Finally emerging from the darkness of the village or town or city, the traveller resolved to walk around the grotesque spectacle with its tick and with its tock, to circumvent the whole terrible ordeal, to continue his travels and leave this horrid place be. Not long after, he came upon a river. The traveller sat down at the bank of the river, filled his water skin with water, drank some and ate some, bathed in sunlight. He thought, "This will be a good day." And that, I think, was that for this ramble. I hope you enjoyed it more than my previous ramblings. Please take a look at the links down below should you wish to support my blog and my channel and my madness. And thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you next time. This is Marielle signing off.